everybody, welcome back to my channel. It's Bondi B here, and today is the second Spooky Sunday. So today's story is going to be about the Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles. And this hotel it's pretty famous, and it actually was one of the inspirations for American Horror Story Hotel. It's not fully about the Cecil Hotel. It's also about H.H. Holmes, but we'll get into him. He's a whole nother video. So let's get into the story. So the Cecil was built in 1924 by hoteler William Bakes Hanner. And it was meant to be a destination for businessmen and people who, you know, definitely not, I don't think it was supposed to be like the rich, but definitely people who were a little bit more wealthier. And it was designed by Lloyd Lester Smith and the Beaux Art style. So the lobby of this hotel is absolutely beautiful. And it cost $1 million to complete, and had a marble lobby and stained glass windows and potted palm trees. Absolutely beautiful. Now, you know, William had invested, he was pretty confident about his invention. And he had, you know, pretty good knowledge of hotels and whatnot. And he had similar hotels, you know, that had been established in downtown Los Angeles. Now, this is where the problems start arising. Is within 5 years of its opening, the Great Depression started. Now, because of the Great Depression, the area started becoming overran with homeless people and transients. Up to 10,000 homeless people, have lived within a 4-mile radius. And by the 1950s, the hotel just gained a complete reputation for transients, and the hotel actually sat where the infamous Skid Row is. So, and also, once all this happened, people started going to started staying at the Biltmore Hotel, which is a little close. It's not super far away, but it was in a little bit of better area. Now, as the area of the Cecil Hotel began its decline, suicides and other violent deaths on the premises, they became more and more frequent. And throughout the 40s and the 50s, more suicides occurred. So they happened all the way from the 30s all the way up into the 50s, 60s. And residents who started living at the hotel began to call it, instead of the Cecil, the suicide, because it became so infamous for the amount of suicides that had happened in this hotel. Now, I'm going to go over a few of the more mysterious suicides and deaths of the Cecil. So the very first documented one was in 1931, and it was a guest named Y.K. Norton, which he died in his room from ingesting poisonous capsules. No suicide note was given. Then later, a few years later, it was late July 1934, a former Army Medical Corps Sergeant, Louis D. Borden, age 1953, was found mysteriously dead in the room at the Cecil after he slashed his own throat with a razor and leaving several notes behind, one of which stated that he had poor health as a reason for his suicide. I don't know about you, but that seems like an awful way to kill yourself. Now, in October 12, 1962, so 30 years later, Pauline Otten, 27 years old, had an argument with her husband, Dewey. And so they had this horrible argument, her and her estranged husband, and he had left the room. So, Pauline wrote a suicide note and then proceeded to jump out of the 9th floor window, which, while jumping, she landed on top of George Gianni, 65, and which killed them both instantly. There was no witnesses, and originally, police had believed that they had jumped together. But because Gianni had his hands in his pockets, they realized that she had fell on top of him and killed both of them. And another more evidence that pointed to this was, had he had jumped, his shoes would have fallen off during the fall and during the impact, and obviously his hands would have not been in his pockets. Now, we're going to get into another mysterious death that happened. And this is the murder of Pidgey Golden Osgood, June 4th, 1964. She was a hotel worker and a retired phone operator, found dead in her room. She had been stabbed and beaten, and her room was completely ransacked. She was known in the area and had earned her nickname because she would feed the birds in nearby Pershing Square. Now, nearby her body, the police found a Los Angeles Dodgers cap that she always wore and her sack of birdseed. Hours after her murder, Jacques B. Elinger, 29 years old, was seen walking through Pershing Square, which, of course, is where Goldie would feed the birds. And he was wearing blood-stained clothing. He was arrested and charged with her murder, but was later cleared of the crime, and Pigeon Goldie's murder remains unsolved. On September 1st, 1992, so we're getting into the more recent deaths now, a male adult was found deceased in the alley behind the Cecil. Authorities believed the descendant either fell or jumped from or was pushed from the hotel's 15th floor. They're not sure how he came to be in the alley behind the Cecil. But at the time of his death, he was 5 feet 9 inches tall, weighed 185 pounds, wearing blue sweatpants, a black sweatshirt over a gray t-shirt, and the Los Angeles County's Coroner's Department placed his age between 20 to 32, and his true identity has never been discovered. One that's shockingly more recent, and this one's actually a little bit more famous, and actually a lot more mysterious than these previous deaths, is on February 19th, 2013. Okay, let's rewind here. So, there was this Canadian woman who came to LA by herself to sightsee. You know, she's a tourist to visit, and she got a room at the Cecil Hotel. Elisa Lam, she's a 21-year-old. She was a Canadian student. Excuse me, I keep saying Canadian. She was a student. Now, this is where things get mysterious. While on vacation in Los Angeles, she disappears. She's gone. They cannot find her. They don't know what happened to her. She just goes missing. She talked to her family and poof, into thin air. The only thing, like the last anybody had seen her was surveillance cameras inside the elevator, in which she was acting strange and suspiciously, and which she kept popping her head in and out of the elevator looking as if she was trying to hide for somebody and pressing all the buttons. That's the last anybody's ever seen her. And people speculate, what was she doing in this elevator? So, after she disappears, the water in this hotel, it's fine, but she's gone for a week or so, and the water starts turning gray. The water in the hotel starts smelling bad. You know, and people are complaining to management and whatnot. What's going on in the water tower? After this, you know, I think she went missing on January 31st, 2013. So 3 weeks later, after all these complaints, they finally go and they check the water tanks on top of the hotel. And it was February 19th, 2013. So how many years ago was that? 7 years ago? The naked body of Elisa Lam was found inside one of the water tanks. She was decomposing, and she was discovered by a maintenance worker. And now, this is where the questions arise. How did she end up there? She couldn't have possibly climbed in herself. The lids to the tanks are very, very heavy. And why would she have climbed in naked? No security cameras ever showed how she got there. The doors remain locked to get to the roof of the hotel. So it had to have been somebody who was working at the hotel for her to even make it up there. How and why she ended up there, nobody knows. Now, they did determine her death to be an accidental drowning. But there's no other reason, with the exception of, what nobody knows. They have speculated that perhaps when she was in the elevator and she was pressing all the buttons and looking out, she was trying to get away from somebody. She was trying to hide and trying to get away quickly. But nobody knows. Now, there are a lot of theories that go along with her death. And one of the main theories was that she had bipolar disorder, and possibly this caused her strange behavior in the elevator and somehow made her end up in the water tank. But once again, that question is asked, how did she get up there? She didn't have a key. She wouldn't have been able to lift that tank on her own. The lid had at least to get up on the roof. So there's that speculation. Now there's one. I don't know. This one's kind of lame. Well, I wouldn't say lame. I mean, I guess if you want to believe it. But there's another whole conspiracy rumor, urban legend, that claims that she was playing the elevator game. I'm not sure if you guys ever heard the elevator game. I know there's a video of Shane Dawson, when Shane Dawson and, what was it called, the Ghost Boys, when him and Garrett and Drew go and they played the elevator game. I believe he also did a video on Alicia Long. So basically, it's like you get in that elevator and you press some sort of combination of numbers and it sends you into another dimension. So people have conspiracies that she was doing that sent her into another dimension, and somehow she ended up in the water tank. I'm definitely somebody who believes in paranormal, but I feel like, I mean, that just seems a little far-fetched. Now, we're going to get into we're going to get into the last death and the most recent one that had happened at the hotel. And that was on July 13, 2015, and the body of a 28-year-old man was found outside the hotel. They believe he may have committed suicide by jumping out of the hotel, though a spokesperson for the county coroner informed the LA Times that there was no cause of death, that they could not determine a cause of death. So that is the last death that had happened at the hotel. It's another mysterious one, and I do find it interesting that what is causing all these mysterious deaths now. There's also a few other interesting things. So, one of the more famous things too, and another thing that the Hotel Cecil is definitely known for, is that it was one of the first stops that the Black Dahlia, Elizabeth Short, had made once arriving in Los Angeles. So the story goes that she came up from San Diego to be a Hollywood actress, per everybody who moves to LA. People do that. And because the hotel was so close to the train station, people would stop off, and back and then too, you could just check your luggage into whatever hotel. She was actually heading to the Biltmore, but stopped there first for a drink, and that was one of the last places she was seen before being found the next day. So so it's famous for the Black Dahlia, and then now we get into the even more wild. So Along with these mysterious deaths, two very well-known serial killers also stayed there during their killing sprees. The first one being the Satanist serial killer Richard Ramirez, otherwise known as the Night Stalker, who went up and down the state of California murdering people. So the Night Stalker started out in San Francisco. He would murder people in the night in LA. And I don't know if you guys know about the little town of Visalia, but it's also suspected that he was the one burglarizing homes in the middle of the night in Visalia when he would go back up to San Francisco to visit one of his friends. So he had stayed at the Cecil during the 1980s. And while he stayed there is when he was breaking into homes and robbing and brutally murdering his victims before he would go back to the hotel. Now, there was good reason he chose the Cecil. You see, serial killers tend to be very calculating, and he chose this hotel for a reason. He chose this hotel because during the 1980s, it was particularly wild. There was transients, there was drug use, there was prostitutes, there was like crazy things going on. Drug dealers out in the open dealing drugs inside the hotel. The police typically would not even go near and touch the hotel. There would be people, bodies from people who've overdosed right next to somebody selling drugs. I mean, it was absolutely wild. So he picked this hotel because there was a lack of police presence, and because after he murdered somebody, he could come back to the hotel, dump his bloody clothes out in the dumpster in the alley, and then proceed to walk inside the hotel naked, still covered in blood, and nobody would question him. Nobody would say anything. There were so many wild things that it wasn't anything weird. It wasn't anything new. That was completely normal. So, eventually the Night Stalker's caught. I don't know if you guys have heard the story of the Night Stalker and how he was caught. I guess it's another story. Well, that's another video for another time. It's actually rather interesting how he was caught. Which is basically leads up, I believe he was in East LA and he was chased down and beat up until the police came. I'm sorry, I'm laughing. He fully deserved it. So, moving on. So, flash forward a few more years. It's 1991. There's an Austrian man living, obviously, in Austria. He's a journalist. He's 41 years old, and his name is Jack Unterweger. I believe I said that right. Well, he was following the Night Stalker's career. And he told his company, his job, that he was going to move. He was going to come to sunny California, and he was going to do a crime report on, the shenanigans, the crime, the murders that were going on in Los Angeles at the time. So he chose he comes over to Los Angeles and he chooses the Cecil Hotel, and he chooses it for one reason, and that is the connection to the Night Stalker, to Richard Ramirez. He wants to sleep in the same place Richard Ramirez slept. Now, during this time, when Jack was down in LA, he was going on right along to the LAPD. He was interviewing them. He was pretending to write his crime report, his journal article, and he wasn't really, he wasn't on the ride-alongs for actual research. This was his chance to scout and figure out how to hunt these prostitutes and figure out where they were so he could strangle them. Now, eventually, Austrian police had connected him to 6 unsolved murders in Austria, and then figured out he had committed the 3 strangulations, the strangulation deaths in Los Angeles too. And so they put 2 and 2 together and figured out it was him, and he was arrested. And so after he was arrested, he had actually escaped back. He escaped to Miami. I believe he wasn't rearrested till 1992, in which case they did take him back to Austria, and he was put into jail. He was arrested, put into jail. Richard Ramirez himself, he was caught, and 6 years later. So when Richard Ramirez was caught, he actually got life in prison, and he died, I believe, in 2013. So the Cecil Hotel has quite the interesting history. Now, if you get online, you could find all the deaths that have happened here. There's quite a few. There's even supposedly a little boy who haunts one of the windows on the 4 stories you could see him from the outside. The question is I understand the location of this hotel. What I want to know is, regardless of the location, for these deaths to happen since the 1930s when it first opened, isn't that odd? Isn't that strange? That while it makes sense while being off Skid Row later in the later years, but from that to be the very first thing that starts at that hotel, what happened? What could have possibly caused this? Because I know all hotels have had people commit suicide. You know, it's totally a thing. I unfortunately had stayed. This is really horrible to talk about, but I had actually, I don't know if you guys have heard over the summer about the Royal Caribbean ship where somebody had jumped off. I was on that ship when that happened. Absolutely horrifying. So I know that it is a thing, but most hotels don't have this many deaths happen. And it's almost like, you know, every year, every couple years. And I just want to know that, what's going on here? Like, is there some sort of paranormal? What? It reminds me, I don't know. I know this is like totally not real, but if you guys have ever seen Stephen King's 1408, like that's almost what this reminds me of. Is there something there that is making people do this, that is driving people mad? Especially, you know, it's just, for people to like leap out of windows, you know, I get the transients, like I said that a million times already, but I get like the transients and people killing themselves because of drugs, whatever. I mean, I'm okay with it, but I understand that. But from the day one of people poisoning themselves, you slashed your own neck open, which is a very odd way to commit suicide. It's just strange. And I just wonder if there's something else going on here. But the Cecil Hotel, it had changed a few years ago to the Stay on Main. They wanted to rebrand, change their name, hoping that it would bring more, you know, people to stay, more tourists. Thought maybe it would make the hotel, make people, you know, want to stay there. Maybe they would think it's in a better area. Maybe they would think it's a nicer hotel than what it is, and that it doesn't have this horrible, god-awful past. And that didn't work out. So the hotel's actually shut down right now. From what I've read, it's being built into a really nice apartment building. So hopefully that, you know, its history finally changes and it gets the love that it deserves. Because it was meant to be a beautiful hotel. And just from day one, it's almost as if the hotel itself is cursed. And that it was never meant to be what it's supposed to be. Because when it was built, that area of LA wasn't god-awful. And then it's been on a decline since the 30s. And hopefully this Cecil will finally have its shining moment. And it will no longer be this scary place to go off of Skid Row. And maybe but there will be no more suicides, which one can only hope. And anyways, I hope you enjoyed this spooky Sunday. I really enjoyed talking about the Cecil Hotel. And it's just, because this hotel, I don't know, it's just so mysterious, like, the way everything goes down. So anyways, I hope you guys have a great night. Thank you for joining me again for Spooky Sunday. I am trying to get better at my storytelling. I feel like I cut my own self off a lot because I never stopped talking. But yeah, thank you guys so much. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Add me on Instagram. I'll drop that below at Miss Blondie B. Thank you guys again. Bye-bye.